Welcome to Beyond the Scoreboard, the podcast that takes you inside the huddle, beyond the plays, and into the minds of coaches. I'm Perry Black, and each episode will bring you exclusive interviews with coaches from all levels, sharing their stories, strategies, and lessons they've learned along the way. So pull up a seat, let's get beyond the numbers, beyond the highlights, beyond the scoreboard. Welcome to Beyond the Scoreboard, the podcast where we dive into the world of coaching. I'm your host, Perry Black, and I'm thrilled to have you with us today. In our second episode, we're talking about the art of building champions both on and off the field. My guest is a man who knows all about this, Coach David Cofer, a high school football coach with a reputation for not just winning games, but also shaping young lives. Coach Cofer, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. I'm an avid podcast listener myself, and so anytime I can kind of participate in these kind of things, I think it's good. And one of the things that I've always valued is listening to other coaches that are in the same situations that I'm in. And you go to coaching clinics and you could listen to Nick Saban. The resources at Alabama and Colfax and Pullman, where I've coached, are a little bit different. So I just really think this is a great thing that you're doing, and I'm looking forward to seeing it take off. And just really excited to be a part of this.
Well, thanks, Cofer. And I'm the same way. I listen to probably too many podcasts, if you ask my wife, but I definitely enjoy listening to other coaches coach or watching other coaches coach, but I think listening to them is just as important. So let's just start with your story. Tell us about your journey in athletics prior to becoming a coach.
Yeah, obviously athletics has been a huge part of my life from as far as I can remember. Obviously just growing up in a small town like Pullman, a small college town, really my love for athletics started when I was, probably 4 years old, and I was just going to Cougar games, and that was one thing that my parents really valued, was getting season tickets to everything. I mean, we went to, all the basketball games and football games and baseball games, and that really sparked my interest in athletics. Both my parents didn't play athletics growing up, obviously maybe some little league stuff, but nothing in high school. And so it's kind of a new world for them, but that's what I kind of leached onto. And I can remember just playing everything, from pee-wee soccer to t-ball into basketball and flag football and all those things. And, obviously I feel like you and I both probably grew up in a golden era where there wasn't as much technology. I can remember, obviously, Super Nintendo and things like that, but it wasn't like we were at home socializing through those means. We went out and played. And, I think it's kind of cool. I tell kids this all the time when I'm teaching. When we play kickball and PE and things like that. We started our own kickball league one summer, and we had the 4 parks in Pullman, and each neighborhood had their own team, and we did the standings, and sports was just a big part of my life at that time. And one of the things that was awesome about the friend group that I had growing up was whatever we did at recess followed whatever season was in play at that time. So, in the fall we'd play football, and wintertime we'd play basketball, even outside. I remember snow being on the, chain hoop and all those kind of things. And I remember actually a funny story in elementary school. We were playing baseball, and we had a perfect setup at the old Franklin Elementary School, and, it had a fence. The fence was connected to somebody's backyard, obviously. And so we'd bring our aluminum bats, and we would, play a full sandlot style game of baseball. And I remember we kept hitting the tennis balls into this person's backyard. And so they ended up taking away the metal bats, and they gave us the plastic wiffle ball ones, and we were upset. And so we were going to go tell the principal, we want our aluminum bats back. And we all kind of stormed into the office. We were ready to talk to her about it. And I remember the secretary saying, yeah, the principal's not in right now. And we're just like, oh, okay. And we just turned around, went back, never brought it up again. We were pretty brave until that moment.
Right.
But yeah, just, playing everything. And, obviously I latched onto football. That's one thing that I'm very passionate about, but I continue to be a multi-sport athlete. And I think that's really important. And that's one thing that I valued growing up is just playing those different sports with your friends and that group that you've kind of connected with for so long. And, that's one thing that I'm really happy about growing up in a small town. Obviously, I'm in a little bit of a different environment now in Colfax, a little bit smaller. But, to me, Pullman was a very small town. It allowed us to play multiple sports growing up and really get those connections. And that's one thing I loved about athletics, was just the connections that you built. Looking at football in particular, I remember in Pullman at the time, we didn't have tackle football until 8th grade. And so it was kind of this anticipation and this buildup. We played flag football all throughout growing up. Obviously, we played sandlot style football at recess and things like that, but we weren't allowed to actually put the helmet and pads on until 8th grade. And I went to my physical that year, and they found a hernia. And so I remember they told me, you're going to have surgery and you're going to be out about 6 weeks. And that was the entirety of the football season. And I remember being devastated by that. I had some visions of playing football at the next level at that point, and really looking forward to getting into high school, and thought that 8th grade was pretty important. And, it's those little moments like that at the time you don't necessarily understand. But looking back, it kind of set up my path in playing the game of football really well. We had a kid that was a quarterback for the 8th grade team, really good player. And, I had always kind of envisioned myself as a receiver. So we go into freshman football, and we had about 40 kids turn out for freshman football, which is kind of a thing of the past. I mean, you're probably in the same boat. I wish we could get 40 kids out for freshman football. But anyways, that kid actually got moved up to JV to play quarterback for the JV team. And so here we were as a freshman team. We didn't have a quarterback. I wanted nothing to do with playing quarterback. I thought there's no way. I didn't view myself as a leader. I thought there was a lot that went into that position. And I remember Coach McAleer pulled me aside and he goes, "Hey, I want you to throw a few passes. I think you'd make a really good quarterback. And currently we don't have one. So, I'm just going to try some guys out." And I remember, I don't want to play quarterback. I kept telling him, I don't want to play quarterback. And sure enough, I ended up in that position. I played quarterback my freshman year. I remember a game. We were kind of like the air raid back in the day, but what people didn't understand was Coach McAleer was just giving me one read. I mean, he was just telling me what receiver to throw it to. But I remember we played Lakeside my freshman year, and we went out at the captain's meeting, and they kind of go, "Here, are you guys any good?" "Well, yeah, I mean, we're okay. We're 5-0. Like, "Oh, well, we're 6-0. "Oh, okay, cool." We ended up beating them something 42 to nothing. I mean, we had a great game. I remember I passed for over 350 yards in a freshman football game, and I remember the Lakeside fans gave us a standing ovation as we left the field. That's how much of an impression we made. Just in our ability to throw the ball around and kind of be a dynamic team at such a young level. Going into my sophomore year, they ended up making a switch. They moved the kid that had played quarterback for the JV team. They moved him to receiver. I was now the quarterback in my class, and kind of that was my identity now. I was being a quarterback, and I found a love for it. And again, all those things wouldn't have happened if, and maybe they would have, but probably wouldn't have happened if I would have played my 8th grade year. Maybe I would have been a good receiver, whatever, right. Kind of that part of the journey that you don't understand, but the end result is what you want. My sophomore, junior year, I was behind a guy named Jay Brossman. I don't know, some people in the area might remember who he was. Ended up playing AA baseball for the Angels, got a full ride scholarship to play baseball at the University of Utah. So pretty good athlete to be stuck behind, just 1 year behind. And so I didn't really get a chance to play quarterback my sophomore and junior year. And I remember going into my junior year, I knew that I would get a chance for the starting position, but ultimately I knew he was going to win it. And so I didn't want to play. I loved playing quarterback my sophomore year. Actually, this is a funny side story. My sophomore year, I was on the kickoff team, and we had an incident the day before our homecoming football game. So it was a Thursday practice where somebody had done something at a restaurant, and so they were going to punish us for it. And so I remember they told us to wear knee pads to practice, which we didn't do on Thursdays. So we were going to do 800 yards of up downs. Well, a guy that was ahead of me as a junior ended up quitting. He walked off the field. This is the night before the game or day before the game. And so pretty soon, here I am as a sophomore. I'm playing JV quarterback. I'm primarily playing a lot of JV stuff, and I'm on some special teams. And now all of a sudden, night before the game, I'm the starting kick returner. I am the punt returner. I'm on every special teams. I'm starting at receiver, and I'm starting at corner. And I remember I didn't sleep much that night, and that first kickoff return, we ended up getting the ball. I was sitting there going, oh, I just want to kick off first. I don't want to be the returner right off the bat. Obviously it's, as a coach now, you want to act like you were that player that always wanted to be out there. And, but the reality was we were just like any of the kids that we coach now, and anyways, I remember the rule was you had to put your heels on the 10. And we were told that if the ball went over your head, just let it go. It's going to go in the end zone anyway. So we were playing Chihuahua. They kick off. My heels are on the 10, goes over my head. Well, it was, mid-September, maybe a little dew on the ground at that point. The ball stops on the 2-yard line. Oh, no. So I run back there, I pick it up, and by the time I turn around and look, I don't have one blocker left. I mean, there's 6 guys bearing down on me. And I remember I just got lit up, and it kind of settled me in. And I kind of look at that. That was kind of my first real varsity moment when I was a sophomore there. And I look at that as kind of shaping the rest of my time. Here I am just getting absolutely lit up by 6 guys, and hey, it wasn't that bad. And it kind of just drew me into things a little bit more. But anyways, my sophomore, junior year, I played a lot of different positions. I played receiver, I played corner, I played safety. I was on a lot of different special teams. And at the time, I didn't understand it. I really wanted to be a quarterback, and that's what I was, focused on doing. And again, now it's a new appreciation for a lot of different positions because I've played in those positions. I thought there was no way I was going to get looked at the next level if I wasn't a quarterback for multiple years. And, my senior year came, and before my senior season, our coach resigned. We had kind of struggled my sophomore and junior year. We were 3-6 my sophomore year, 4-5 my junior year. And here it is. Now we're going to have a brand new coach. And anytime you bring in a brand new coach, obviously going into my senior year, I put in all this work with this coaching staff to be the starting quarterback. I know the offense. I'm ready to go. This is my time. Wait a minute, now we have a whole new coach. Maybe he's going to want to go with somebody younger. Maybe he's going to switch my position. This is my time to be a quarterback. Yeah. I remember being pretty uneasy about that. And again, it ended up being one of those decisions that really shaped my path going forward when we hired Coach Bob Wolin from Rochester High School. And I remember, obviously, when you're a kid, there's all these rumors, oh, he's so tough, and oh, he's an option guy. You're never going to get to throw the ball. And, all these different things that were going into this new hire. And, obviously when Coach Wolin came over, he set a tone that really resonated with our group of this high expectation. As a group, when we were in 6th grade, Pullman made the state football championship. And I remember a lot of guys that I was close with had older brothers on the team. And that was something that we always strive for. We were going to be the group that got us back to the state championship game. Sophomore year, we're 3-6. Junior year, we're 4-5. Now we have a brand new coach, and that never changed our vision of going back to the state championship game. And I remember when Coach Wolin came in, the very first meeting, we're all sitting in the gym there at the high school, and the door closed behind him, and it's just silent. I mean, it's like something from the movies. He comes in, and the door closes, and it's silent. And I remember him saying, "There's about 6 teams every year that have a chance to win a state championship. 6 teams in the 2A classification, and I want us to be one of them." And I just remember that just resonating with us, those high expectations that he was going to put on us. We were craving. We were ready for it. We go into that senior season, and we're excited, and we got a new coach, and I'm playing quarterback, and this is going to be great. We open with Clarkson. Clarkson at the time was 3A. They were really good back in that era. Guys like Stephen Bloom and Curtis's kid was at quarterback, and they were good. They were loaded. I don't know how we ended up playing them. We haven't played them before. We must have needed a game at the last minute. But, it was an August night down in the valley, and it was about 96 degrees at kickoff probably. I mean, it was hot, and we got killed. We lost 30-6. Here we are all excited. Man, this coach is going to change things. He's talking about taking us to a state championship game. This is awesome. And here's our first game. It's 30-6. And, I've talked to Coach Wolin recently in years about that moment. And, he's thinking, why did I just leave this great program that I built in Rochester to come over here to Pullman? And these guys don't get it. Yeah. I remember after that game, they graded us, and they graded us on effort. We weren't there yet. We weren't ready to take that next step because we had never been pushed like that before. We'd never had those expectations put on us. And I remember we got graded, and looking at our grades, I think I was at like a 61%. And that was the first time that I kind of, reflected and looked at myself as a player. And, there's a lot of different moments in that season that were great. That was one turning point. We won 8 games in a row after that. I remember that next week we played Moscow and put it all together, and we wanted to win for our coach that had set this expectation up, that had come over and moved his family from the west side. At the time, we didn't realize it, how player-led we really were. Obviously, I think in order to be a really good player-led team, you have to have a strong coach as well that sets those expectations and allows you to lead. But we started to develop into a player-led team. Senior night, we have Medical Lake coming to our place. We're undefeated. They're undefeated in league. Hey, here's our first step. Here's how we're going to match up. Here's how we're going to go into the playoffs and really springboard ourselves into making it to that state championship game. And it's on our home field. It's going to be great. We ended up losing 27-0. I mean, we did not play well at all. And so we ended up getting the 2 seed out of our league into playoffs. And, we can go on and on about the WIA. I liked that playoff structure better, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Because it was just a guaranteed path into the playoffs, and you matched up with a regional team, and you kind of could know for a couple weeks who you were going to play and what side of the bracket you were going to be on. And I really, miss that, I guess, in some aspects. But we ended up drawing Othello round 1. Othello was ranked number 1 in the state at the time. Their only loss was to Prosser, who was a 3A team at that point. We got to go to their place. And I remember back then they had message boards and they would do predictions. And I remember every prediction was Othello 55, Pullman 6. They were very generous in thinking that we weren't going to get shut out.
Yeah.
We were outmatched. We were outsized. I remember my offensive line, I outweighed all of them. I'm not a big guy. I weighed 175 pounds in high school. And here they are. I mean, they go about, 200 plus across the board up front, and the physical team. And I don't think too many people thought we had a chance. I remember plugging in that VHS back in the day. You had one copy, and I remember they found a copying machine for VHS tapes. They gave one to me and one to Travis Morshak, who was kind of the captain of our defense, and we got to take that home. Now that was a big deal. Now these kids have Huddle at their disposal, and they barely watch it. But that's another thing we'll get into. But anyways, I remember popping in that video, that VHS, calling up Travis Morshak and say, we got a chance. These guys aren't as good as people say they are. We have a chance to beat these guys. And that was a belief that really permeated around our entire group, just from a player standpoint. I don't know if all the coaches thought we had a chance. I think they maybe had plans to go hunting the next weekend or whatever. I don't think they would admit that now, but it was that belief system in ourselves that we can do this. We can hang with these guys. We can beat these guys. Let's get after it. We had a horrible week of practice, and a lot of times, you go into a game after a week of practice like that, and you're nervous. We weren't. I don't know why, but again, these are all things that I feel like were set up by the environment that Coach Woolen brought. It was just that confidence with those high expectations that set you up for success. I remember the first play of the game, we get a stop. We forget to send a returner back on punt, and so they down it on the 8-yard line. And I'll never forget this play. It was called 34 keep, so it was an option. It was a belly lead fake. I got to keep it. I still have my pitch guy on the outside. I hated going to my left. I wasn't very strong pitching with my left hand, but just a play to get us out of that area, to give us a shot to sustain a drive. And I remember I turned the corner, and there was nobody there. I don't know how there was nobody there, but there was nobody there. I take it up the sideline, and we ended up scoring on that very first play, 92-yard touchdown. And I remember being so amped up. All I could do when I got to the end zone was just let out this big scream. And, obviously everybody's celebrating. And by the time I got to the sideline, I could not catch my breath. And, throughout my time growing up, I used to look at football players with oxygen tanks on the sideline and go, why would they need that? Here's these athletes that are in such great shape. Why would you ever need that? And I really could have used that at that point. But no, little things you remember and catch on to. We ended up winning that game. We found a way to continue our momentum, and we ended up making it to the state championship game. And, obviously at the time, it wasn't really a big shock to us. We had always talked about it. We had now had these expectations that we can do this, and we made it to the game. And, looking back, that vision that we had was not one that a coach told us about or put on us. It was ours, and I think that's very powerful. When you look at coaching books and you talk to other coaches, if you can get your team to be player led instead of coach fed, that's one of my favorite things that came out of the WSU football season was that quote. We want guys that are player led, not coach fed. But looking back, it was all about making it to the game. And by the time we made it to the game, we had kind of arrived in a sense, and we didn't play well. And we got beat. And that was one of those things that, obviously you never forget. I don't think I've still watched the full game of us being in that state championship game and losing the way that we did. But obviously we made it, and it's a huge accomplishment. At the time, you don't really understand it. We're one of 4 teams in Pullman High School history to make it to a state football championship game. That's a huge accomplishment. You don't get that at the time. And I remember being pretty devastated. And, obviously the blueprint that we established, there was a lot of kids that were sophomores that were similar to us in a sense that they wanted to get there as well, that sophomore class. And, obviously in 2005, so 2 years after we were done, they ended up going back to the state championship game and they won it. And when you look back as a player on things that you've done, obviously that's something you can be very proud of, is you set those guys up for success because you showed them a blueprint and a path. And obviously being a senior, the first year that a new coach takes over, you've got a lot of responsibilities. I mean, you've got to, forget what you've done in the past and buy into this whole new system. And I think that's important even now in coaching, is getting that buy-in. Ultimately it doesn't matter what scheme you run or what you do. If you've got buy-in, you're going to be successful. And obviously there's many different blueprints on how it's done. We all can't be Royal City and Tumwater. We got to be the best versions of ourselves. And I think we set that up being a senior that year. And that season is what got me to where I am today. Obviously we'll talk about my coaching journey, but I never would have, seen myself as a coach had it not been for that connection that Coach Woolen brought. Seeing coaching in a different light, by far one of my favorite experiences, and connecting with those around us and accomplishing something that was bigger than ourselves and something we can always look back on and be proud of. And, I definitely wouldn't have got into coaching had it not been for that experience. I wanted to be a broadcaster growing up and never thought of myself as a coach. And that year really, really changed me and changed my outlook on things. And, it was something very special. Didn't spend long, at the next level. Went to junior college down in California and played football there. It didn't work out. I ended up getting injured in fall camp. They told me that I should go home and have surgery on my shoulder. And so I went home. I took myself out of that environment, and knowing that I probably wouldn't go back. And, I was a tweener back then. They weren't looking for 5'11" quarterbacks that could run. It was more of a drop back style. And, and that's one thing that I look at with quarterbacks nowadays. They have no idea what it's like to get under center, 3-step drop, try to throw a slant, and everybody in front of you is taller than you. The shotgun's pretty comfortable, but yeah, that's kind of all my athletic experience. And obviously I played basketball and I played baseball, and I've got a lot of different experiences from that. And I enjoyed those multi-sports. I always looked forward for a new season starting up. I couldn't imagine just focusing on one. I think I would have been miserable. I loved going into a new season. I enjoyed when football got over and now it was basketball season. I enjoyed when basketball got over and now we've got baseball season. I just really enjoyed that. And that's something obviously that I continue to value, that I continue to try to push to kids is get that break. Even a sport that you're very passionate about, get that break, man. Go do something else. Get your mind off that specific sport and just enjoy being around your teammates and playing a new sport. And might be something you're not as good at. And I think that's important, especially for our leaders. In the quarterback position, you're obviously forced into a leadership role, but I don't think that is, the only position that can be a leadership type of position, especially now as a coach, I've seen that. But I think it's important for leaders to go play another sport that might be passionate for somebody else, and maybe I'm not the guy in this sport, but I'm here to help you because I know that this is a sport that you're passionate about, and I'll be a role guy in this sport, and you do the same when we come back to my sport. And so that was my experience growing up was just playing multiple sports, and I really just enjoyed all of them.
So kind of to piggyback on that, Kofa, what do you think happened from kind of our time, 10 or 20 years ago to now, where that kind of has been lost, I'm going to play football for you, you need to play basketball for me type thing? Why do you think that went away?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different reasons for that. I think our society has changed, as well, not just in the athletic sense, just in general. But I think, I see a lot of kids this way that are so focused on that next level that they don't enjoy the time that they're in high school where they have an opportunity to go do all these things when they can specialize as they get older in that next level. And I think there's a lot of pressure now on, if you don't do this year round, if you don't commit yourself to one sport, you're going to get washed up by the people that are doing that one sport. And so I think there's a lot of outside influence. Obviously, if we wanted to make this podcast 4 hours longer, I could talk about maybe some monetary issues that go into that as well. But I think there's a lot of pressure on kids focused on that next level, that they bypass where they're at now, where this is a great time to just be invested in where you're at, in the sports that you're playing, and let's help each other out. I think there's certain sports where you do have to keep your skill set up throughout the off season, and that can look different from sport to sport. But things like basketball, you have to continue to work on your skills to be a good basketball player. You have to continue to work on your skills to be a good baseball player. That's part of one of the things I love about football. You just have to be willing, and you have to be a good athlete. You don't have to, continue to work on those skills year round. But, the other thing that I think has changed, and maybe you can speak to this as well, because when I was growing up, our summer schedule was way different than what the summer schedule looks like now. I'm a big believer in, letting kids specialize in the summer in a sense. And now summer has turned into almost another season. And when you have those kids that are multi-sport kids, they're having practice on the same day. So they might have, basketball practice from 3 to 5:30, and now the football coach wants them from 5:30 to 7.
Yeah.
Now the baseball coach wants them from 7. I mean, it's the demands of summer have turned kids away, I think, from playing a sport that they might not be as interested in. Or, I can see it. Obviously, I'm a parent of a senior in high school. I've seen it from a parent perspective, from a kid perspective now, of so much stuff in the summer. We don't allow kids the time to rest, get away from things, take vacations, or specialize. If a kid's really into, and that's one of the biggest things that I try to do in my program is, if you really want to be a great basketball player and you want to spend all summer playing basketball, that's great. I'll see you August 17th when we start up, because I'd rather have you than not have you. And I'm not going to put those restrictions on you, like you have to be here 75% of the time or else you can't play, Now, if you're in town and you're not doing anything, you're laying on your couch instead of being at a weightlifting session, okay, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. If you're going around the country and you're competing and you're specializing, that's great. But we'll see you day one. And I think that not every coach is like that. Every coach wants their piece of their own kids in the summer, and I think that's where that multi-sport, I'll play this for you if you play this for me, has kind of taken a hit. I think a lot of it is a summer thing. And I don't know if you can speak to that. I remember my summer schedule. We played a summer league basketball for a little bit. I played baseball. Yeah. We would go out on our own and play football. I just don't remember these huge demands like we have today.
No, there's no way. Yeah, I was such a baseball guy that I was playing baseball no matter what anybody told me, so I didn't really care. I played all three sports as well, but it was not the summer for me was I'm gonna play baseball and then work out, and if there's a basketball game that I'm able to make, I'll make it, but I'm not going to a basketball practice, not happening. And I will go to I'll go to a football camp if I'm not going to miss, 4, 5 double headers. So that's just the way it was. Today, you would just absolutely piss everybody off if you said that. And I think that was just the mentality of I know my role as an athlete. I know that playing baseball is what I'm probably going to have a chance to play at the next level. That's going to be my personal decision is to play that. I'm going to play everything for everybody else, especially at a small school you have to, but there was just no way that I was going to be able to miss a doubleheader to go play a summer league basketball game. It just wasn't fair because it wouldn't go the other way around. I'm not going to miss a Friday night football game to go play a meaningless fall baseball doubleheader. It's like, so I think we kind of get lost in everything's super important. It's like, well, it
Yeah,
is, but skill development's just as important. So we have to understand that a little bit.
for sure.
All right, Kof. So now tell us a little bit about your journey into coaching. What inspired you to take that path?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of alluded to it a little bit when I was talking about, my journey in athletics, not really wanting or seeing myself as a coach. I really wanted to be a sports broadcaster. I did my senior project on that. I job shadowed different sports broadcasters. I remember when I was a little kid, I used to come up with my keys to the game and do like a fake radio show before big games.
Oh,
It's
that's
just,
cool.
these things that I was just infatuated with. Obviously that's something that I wanted to do. I actually had the opportunity to do some of that in high school. I remember I went and job shadowed Bob Curtis over at Idaho when he was the voice of the Vandals over there and got to sit in a booth and was really immersed in that world of being a sports broadcaster. And that's what I wanted to do. I was a communications major. That's what I was going to do. And so I went to junior college, as I mentioned, right out of high school to play football. Cabrillo Junior College down in Aptos, California. It was a great school. Don't know how I ended up there. It's one of those things that I kind of wish there were junior college football programs closer to home. But anyways, went down there and had a shoulder injury that I couldn't throw. It was on my throwing shoulder, couldn't end up throwing. And as I mentioned, they wanted me to come back home and have surgery. And so I was home at the time and I took some classes right under the 12 credit limit so that my NCAA clock wouldn't have started. I rehabbed my shoulder and, I'd have, found myself with nothing to do. Football was taken away. I was rehabbing my shoulder. I really had nothing to do. And I remember I used to go to Pullman games and I just could never get close to the sideline. It was just weird. I felt disconnected. Obviously I would watch, but I wasn't involved in it at all. And I was kind of lost in a sense. I had football taken away. I was rehabbing this injury. Didn't really know what my next step was going to be. And I didn't really feel the same connection to that group of players and to the program. And it just felt weird. I was just a little lost. And so after rehabbing that fall, I went up and enrolled at Eastern Washington in the winter. They had kind of recruited me a little bit out of high school, had offered me a walk-on spot in high school as well. And I remember talking to Coach Jody Sears, and I really appreciated him not lying to me. He never lied to me. He would say, well, I don't think you're a Big Sky quarterback. You can come up here and play receiver. You can walk on. We'll give you an opportunity, but there's no guarantees whatsoever. And so I went up there and went through the winter and spring quarter and went and tried out during spring ball for the team and it didn't make it. And so now here's, I had this plan that I was going to go up there. I was going to walk on. I was going to play at Eastern and it kind of had inspired me a little bit and changed my outlook. And now that was taken away. And so I went back home in the summer. I remember I didn't have much to do. I was working landscape and, obviously planning to continue school. I enrolled back again at WSU. I was going to be a communications major. I was going to be a broadcaster, and that kind of felt okay, but it didn't really give me that same passion that I was kind of looking for. And I remember one day, my dad telling me, have you ever thought about being a coach? And I said, no. I don't want to be a coach. That's, well, communications major, yeah, that's great, but you, you should think about being a coach. I think you'd be good at it. And I said, there's no way. I have zero patience for high school kids. I said I could maybe coach in college. But now that I'm not playing in college, there's no way that I'm going to be able to make that happen. And so I don't want to be a coach. Fast forward to football season starting up. It was in August, and it was 2 days before the high school season started. And I get a call from Coach Woolen. And he says, "Hey, I just had a freshman coach bail on me. We've got practice starting Wednesday. This is on a Monday. We have practice starting Wednesday. I really need you to come out and coach. I know you're back home. I know you're not doing anything. I think you'd be a good coach, and this is an opportunity." And I said no. I said I can't do that. That's too quick of a turnaround. I can't do it. And so we hung up, and he called me back the next day. "I really need you to come back and do this. I really need you to come out. Nobody knows the offense like you know it. I need somebody good at the freshman level. I'm in a pinch. I've got two guys that are going to coach freshmen, but they don't know the system yet, and it's going to be really hard for me to teach it to them, in a day. I really need you to come out and do this." Obviously, I finally agreed. I wasn't very excited about it, but I agreed. So I went out, and that first practice, I was instantly hooked. It was weird. I thought I would kind of enjoy it. I was hooked. Day one, practice one, I was hooked. I absolutely loved it. I loved interacting with the kids. I loved being a part of a team again. I loved being able to share some knowledge that I had as a player with this new group of freshmen. And, I quickly kind of took over. I was a volunteer that year. I didn't make any money whatsoever, but I was now calling the offense, for game one. Here I am, didn't want to coach, and fast forward to game one. Now I'm basically kind of the offensive coordinator. I'm giving, pregame speeches. It just felt so natural. It was just something that I just latched onto pretty quickly. That group was maybe the most talented group of freshmen that Pullman has ever had. And so I remember we played Post Falls game one, and I didn't even know what to expect. Post Falls comes down. They have two buses for a freshman football game. They've got 42 kids, and they've got 7 coaches, and here we are with 2.5 coaches and 20 kids, and I mean, it's just like, oh, we're gonna get killed. We ended up winning that game, 35-0. And I thought, whoa, this is great, man. Coaching's awesome. I'm such a good coach. Look at me. And man, we won this game, and I had this big influence. And we continued to go through that year, and we dominated. It was a really good group of kids. I remember I had to stop doing hitting drills in practice because they love to hit. And I thought somebody was going to get hurt. I mean, they went full bore, and we ended up going undefeated that year, and I was hooked. I went and changed my major into education, and now that was my goal. I wanted to be a high school football coach, and I loved it, and that's really what started that passion. And again, I go back to, had Coach Woolen not come over my senior year, it wouldn't have instilled that passion for the game that I had. And obviously, he's the one that got me into coaching by calling me 2 days before the season started. And, the rest is kind of history. I continued on that path at Pullman High School, just coaching football. And my second year, I got promoted to the JV. And so now I was the JV head coach, and me and Pete Zukowski. So Pete Zukowski was a guy that was on staff. He was going to Washington State at the time. We were the exact same age. His dad's a Hall of Fame high school coach, Phil Zukowski. He was at Kashmir for many years, Rochester before that. And he's the one that kind of started, Coach Woolen's journey. And so it was kind of this cool, coaching tree that we found ourselves in. So Pete Zukowski's running the defense. I'm running the offense. And I think we outscored opponents that year, 400 something in the 30s. I don't know exactly what it was, but we had an absolute blast. We had 14 guys for a JV team, and it was awesome. And it was a great experience. And again, I'm kind of puffing my chest out. I'm thinking I'm a pretty good coach, man. We're winning all these games, and this is great. And look at all this influence. And obviously now, 17 years into my coaching journey, I understand that the kids you have make a huge difference on wins and losses. I've been through the ups, I've been through the downs. One of the things that was great for me was before I got my first head coaching job, I had coached under in various sports 9 different head coaches. And I think that's a lost art as well. These people that get promoted maybe too soon, maybe they've just been under one coach or one system or one way of doing things. It really limits your potential as a coach. I was able to take different things from those 9 different head coaches that I had the opportunity to coach under and really kind of develop my own personal philosophy of things that I've seen that I really liked, things that I've seen that have worked, things that haven't worked. And I'm really grateful for that experience. I've coached receivers, I've coached DBs, I've coached linebackers, I've coached pretty much everything but defensive line. I've had the opportunity to coach it. At a young age, I was an offensive coordinator. We get a new coach in by the name of Dan Lucier, and he tells me, well, I want you to be my defensive coordinator. I already have my offense figured out. And, here I am, 8 years into my coaching journey, just focusing on offense. And, well, now you're the defensive coordinator. Okay, well, all right, we're starting at square one. That was one of the best things that ever happened to me. I mean, just getting that experience from the other side of the ball. And obviously, I still prefer being an offensive coordinator, but man, that experience I had 5 years as defensive coordinator was huge. Obviously, I coached other sports as well. I remember Coach Brantner, and usually this happens, when you're a young guy that can coach, man, every coach wants you to come out in any capacity, right?
Yeah.
Oh, volunteer, anything. Yeah. But I think that really developed me as a pretty well-rounded coach to go coach another sport. I think it's really important because just like when you go play another sport, you gain a skill set that might help you in the sport that you're really passionate about. I feel the same way with coaching. And so I had the opportunity to start by coaching the sub-varsity basketball team. Then I moved my way up to the freshman team. And then I actually got hired as the head girls basketball coach before I was the head football coach. And I remember, it was a crazy circumstance, but I had said one of my goals was to be a head coach before I was the age of 30. And here I am at 29 and I'm the head girls basketball coach. I mean, it's a weird journey how you get to that. Man, the things that I learned coaching girls basketball, being a head coach for the first time, really set me up for success. Because as you know, you have no clue what it's like to be a head coach until you're in that seat.
No,
you have no clue. You think you do. You've been around the game long enough. You've been an assistant long enough. But once you get into that head coaching role, it's way different than maybe even thought it was going to be. And that was just a really good experience for me. We did not win a lot of games when I was the head girls basketball coach. We grinded, we developed, we practiced hard. We were, making those steps in the right direction, but we weren't seeing it come out in an outcome standpoint with wins and losses. And that was kind of the start of, why do we do this? Why are we coaches? Is it just to win games? And that's what kind of shifted my outlook on what my role as a head coach really is. And if you look at in a normal high school setting, you're going to have years where you don't win very many games. You're going to have years where you win a lot of games. You're going to have years where you're right in the middle. So what impact do you have as a head coach if you're just looking at wins and losses? And it really kind of helped develop me. Another part of that was at the time I was defensive coordinator under Coach Dan Lucier, and he showed me kind of a huge different outlook on coaching the game of high school football. If anybody knows Coach Dan Lucier, you love him, man. He is the most quirky guy, comes from a great place, just has a great heart for kids. And I remember the first couple times him coming over, and he didn't have a practice plan. No practice plan whatsoever. We go out on the field, and it's just kind of like, well, I think we're going to do this today. Or I think, and it just drove so many coaches nuts. And we were successful. We won games that way. And it really kind of shifted my perspective of, okay, if you can get kids to believe in what you're doing, if kids feel like you have their back, if they feel like, well taken care of and motivated, it doesn't matter. Scheme-wise, it doesn't really matter. I mean, we barely watched film. I mean, name a high school football program that doesn't watch film. And I don't go to that extreme. He really kind of changed my perspective. I remember he gave us a book. It was called Lead for God's Sake. And, not to get too religious, but it was just a good outlook on why we do what we do. As a head coach, you have a lot of influence and you can help guide young people in the right direction and really make them, better people. And I think that's what's important. It gets lost a lot because all we look at is a scoreboard, and it's way more than that, and I think that it really helps when you have that perspective of, this is something that is part of that process of growing up. We're a part of it, and we help and we mold it, and we help people deal with things like adversity and deal with things like losses. And I think it's very important. I took a sports psychology class when I was at Eastern, and I'll never forget this. And I will probably quote a lot of people, and I have no clue who gave me these quotes, but I still use these quotes a lot. It's, sports does not build character as much as it exposes it, right? And so I always latched onto that. We're not trying to build character. We're trying to put them in situations where it exposes their character, and we're there with them to help them navigate those tough times as we go through a season together. It's all about being a part of this group, and you're going to have, times where your character is going to get exposed. And if you don't like the way that you reacted to it, or if that's not going to put us in a place to be successful, then here are some ways that we can help you, improve that. And so, I've always loved that quote, because a lot of times you think of sports as we're here to build, it's on everybody's mission statement as a coach, right? When they go through the interview process, we're going to build men of character. And I don't know if we're necessarily building it. We're exposing it, and we're helping them through those tough times and those tough situations. And that's why I think it's important. Yeah. And so when I really shifted my outlook and didn't, just focus on the wins and losses, just focus on the scoreboard, it really changed my outlook as a coach, and has made it more fulfilling. I get more joy out of, having a former player come back. They're successful. They're just about to be a new dad, and knowing that they're going to be successful in that because of what they went through, in an athletic sense. And obviously it's not all just me or coaching staff or whatever. It's just part of the process. And I think that's what's rewarding for me now, is seeing guys that I've coached come back. And I got to tell you, it's hard to remember, guys that come back, because as much as, obviously we change and grow and get more gray hairs, that transition from being a 16-year-old to being a 24-year-old is pretty substantial. I run into former players a lot. Coach, you remember me? And it's like, I remember the era. I remember the time. Remind me. And it's kind of embarrassing as a coach, but it's cool. That's what's rewarding for me. And, obviously I'm still on this journey, and, every day is not rainbows and sunshine and great, but I really just, I enjoy coaching. It's part of who I am. It's part of my identity, and I'm really glad, I made that decision 18 years ago to start on this. So,
and I love it. I love the fact that most of the time when we talk to coaches, it's never the exact same route. I mean, I've talked to quite a few coaches here now, and I mean, every route is different. It's pretty amazing. I'm probably a little more similar to you than a lot of guys. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew it had to be in athletics. I'm just too competitive of a person to sit at a desk and listen to somebody yell at me all the time. It's just not going to work. But I didn't know what it looked like. My dad was a teacher and coach for 30 years, and he's like, I know what you should do. I just don't know why you're not doing it. Like, what is that? Like, let's see it, right? I was like, let's hear what you got to say. It's like, you would be 10 times the coach and teacher I ever was. It's like, no way. Like, I don't have the temperament for that at all. Like, not at all. He's like, just try it once. I was like, okay, fine. So I actually started by kind of doing some individual instructing, which I really loved. Like, I loved just taking a guy out and hitting or fielding with them or teaching them pitching mechanics. I really liked that. But I found out very quickly that instructing and coaching are not the same. Like, those are not the same things. You can be the best instructor you want, but if you can't lead, it doesn't really matter. So I found out that once I did get my first coaching job, which 2B JV boys basketball, which was extremely fun. I did that for quite a few years, and then that transitioned to somehow 2B JV girls basketball. I'm really not sure how all that went. And then, like, kind of, similar to you, if you coach and you're in a school district, everybody wants you to do something. So then I was coaching high school basketball and coaching middle school basketball at the same time somehow. I'm not sure how I got talked into that, but that worked. I'd coach middle school in the morning times and then high school in the afternoons, and then somehow would make sure that I could get to both the games, which I'm not sure how I did that when I was younger, but it worked. But the moral of the story is just everybody's path is different. But if you can coach and you enjoy coaching, that the path seems to find you somehow. And it's pretty interesting that if you don't love it, though, you find out real fast. That's kind of what I've found out. Is like you either going to find out you love it or you're going to find out you hate it. There's not really an in-between.
For sure. Obviously, coaching different sports, you have different perspectives on bus trips and things like that. Obviously, getting on a bus in the wintertime over Christmas break, when it's a little bit snowing, it's going to take, twice as long to get there and get home. You definitely have to love it. And I think you're probably in the same boat. It's the people that you meet along the way or the people that you do it with that make the difference. I've been fortunate to coach with staffs that are really close, and I think that makes it worth it in a sense, because I think as former athletes, that's what we crave, right? I mean, You were talking about being competitive, and it's frowned upon when you get too competitive in the Uno game around the table, which is but giving that competitive outlet, but also just that sense of being a part of a team, I think is something that's important. And thinking about all the relationships that you've built in that journey that you've taken, and I think that makes it worth it too.
Well, and I think I'll probably coach the rest of my life in some aspect or another, but it's not really what it does for me at this point anymore. It's what it does for my family. Like my 6-year-old son absolutely is in love with Asotan sports. I mean, it's pretty incredible to watch. And so he'll sit there and he does a lot of coloring and drawing. So he'll be at the kitchen table and then I'll look and see what he drawn. He's wrote every lineup for the Asotan basketball team. I don't even coach basketball anymore. Or he'll, beg me to pull up rosters so he can memorize their numbers and stuff. I mean, it's just that kind of stuff that you can't find in any other aspect. I mean, he just loves it. And instead of, watching NFL guys and memorizing NFL players' numbers, he's there watching, the Cody Elses of the world and Chase Ingles and those guys, the people that are really nice to him that he gets to see on a regular basis, but then gets to see them perform in, settings that he thinks the coolest, Friday Night Lights for him is the coolest thing ever, right? Gets to run around the field and see people play, and especially when we do watch it on TV, through NFHS, he thinks those guys are like famous now, you know what I mean? So it's just cool to see how that really brings our family together. He knows that I coach them, but now they became like part of his life. So that kind of stuff's pretty cool too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my kids, grew up in a gym or on the field, and it's great memories, but it also sets them up for success because they've been around it. I feel like my kids always get this, and they're so mature for their age. They can have a conversation with adults. They can actually communicate with people and hold conversations, and just things like that. And I think a large part of that is just them being around older kids all the time. High school kids that, like you said, look after them and take care of them. And, that's another thing that's cool is when former players come back and, their first question is, how's Ross?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I saw Ava. She's huge. What, because they were a part of that. They were part of that journey. And that was great. Actually, funny story. I don't like to embarrass my kids very often, but, my wife coaches volleyball and has for a long time. And, again, you talk about family, we're very much a coaching family. And so our kids had to grow up either on the gym or on the field, or we didn't have any other options. And so I remember we gave them the choice all the time. Do you want to go with mom to volleyball practice, or do you want to go to football practice with dad? And I have great memories of, Ava standing right behind me when I'm coaching the defense. And, you'll never meet a bigger sports fan than her. And those are great memories. But I remember there was about a 2-week stretch, and Ross wasn't coming to football practice with me. He was choosing to go to volleyball instead. And I was like, my son needs to be around football. I mean, he was probably 4 or 5 at this point. And finally, we were driving home one night, and I asked him, and I said, why are you always going to volleyball practice? And he just looked at me and he goes, Dad, the shorts, he wanted to be in the volleyball gym, it's for some reason but I always think that's funny. And it's just a great, great memory, of having your kids around. And that's definitely a huge part of why I enjoy, coaching as well. I think it's really good,
Yeah.
for your kids.
Yeah, there's no alternate for it. There's no substitution that can be made for that kind of stuff. Another kind of story last year, high school baseball team was pretty good at Asotin, and we had some pretty good players. And I'm coaching Little League right after one of our high school games. We won a pretty big game at home, and then I had to run straight to a Little League game to coach my oldest son, JR. And I get there and I look over, and it's about the second inning, and about 4 or 5 of our players that just got done playing one of the bigger games of the season are now watching GR play baseball at some meaningless Little League game. Like, just that kind of stuff is like, man, that's so cool. Like, you don't get that at, part of that's being at a small community. Obviously, I understand that, but, and, nobody recognizes it more than him. He's like, oh my God, what are they doing here? Like, I mean, it's just, that kind of stuff is so cool.
Yeah.
So now real quick, let's talk about kind of your transition from Pullman to Colfax now, and what's that kind of, how that journey went for you, and how did your first year at Colfax go?
Yeah, obviously it was kind of an interesting journey. When you're in the coaching world, you never know exactly how you're going to get to a place or what's going to happen throughout the entire process. Kind of try to be open to it and see what doors open and, what doors close. We made a decision when our kids were young that they were going to go to school in Colfax. My wife grew up in Colfax. Her dad was a teacher and coach here in town for many years. So that was kind of the plan. Allie had worked in Colfax, and it was just going to be easier for us to have our kids, go to Colfax schools. Obviously, when your son and your daughter are in 2nd grade and 6th grade, it seems like, a huge decision that needs to get made in the future, but you kind of put it on the back burner. And so I kind of always knew that, being a football coach, it works out to watch my daughter's competitions, because volleyball games never happen on Friday nights. And usually I can, leave a practice a little bit early to go watch a volleyball game. And then once basketball season and softball season come around, obviously if I'm not coaching, I can go to all those, and that's great. And the challenge becomes, okay, what happens when your son gets to high school? You can't coach a different place football because you play the same night. You'll never get to watch him play. And obviously, ever since, him growing up and having a boy, and, obviously I've wanted to coach him, and we knew that decision was going to happen at some point. And, you continue to have it kind of in the back of your mind. And I've obviously coached both of my kids in different aspects. I've coached them in basketball, AAU, and Little League baseball and things like that. And I love my daughter to death, and her and I, when we were coach and player, just were like Rams, but it didn't work out. And so I knew I much prefer just watching from the stands with her. And, I've coached my son, and there's been some times like that, but I really enjoy it. I like coaching him. And, Ross used to come over with me and in Pullman, and he was a ball boy, and he was very immersed in Pullman football. And, it stressed him out. As he was getting closer to high school with his buddies, constantly asking him, well, where are you going to go? Are you going to go play, football in Pullman, or are you going to stay in Colfax? And I remember, learning this later, but when he was in 6th grade, he had a substitute teacher that he felt comfortable with. And he was kind of having an off day, and they said, what's wrong with you, Ross? What's going on? And he was so stressed out. He just started breaking down and crying about, he doesn't know what he's going to do. I don't want to disappoint my dad and say I want to stay in Colfax. And anyways, it had a lot to do with him. And we knew that was coming close. And, obviously Mike Morgan was there for many years, 26 years as a head coach. And I knew obviously that the time was going to be about the time that Ross was going to be in high school, that he would decide to not coach. And, the opportunity presented itself. I remember I was at state volleyball and started hearing rumblings. Yeah, Mike Morgan's done. He's retiring from coaching. And in my head, I'm like, oh boy, here we go. This is when the decision's going to have to get made. And initially, I didn't want to take it. I had a really good group of seniors coming back in Pullman. And I thought this year, honestly, was a year that we could compete for a league championship with the group that we had coming back. guys that had played as freshmen and sophomore. I mean, we had to go young for a couple years, and I worked through that, and I was looking forward to them being seniors. Guys like, Brady Coulter, who was a ball boy for me since fifth grade. I mean, it was like this huge connection that I had, and I really wasn't ready, I thought. I thought, well, Ross is a year away. So, obviously went back and forth trying to make that decision on whether I wanted to go for it or not. Obviously there were good options either way. But it's funny, I was driving in my car, and I was with my wife, and we were talking back and forth, and I go, another option that nobody's talking about. I mean, I could just coach one more year in Pullman. I could just, resign from coaching, and I could just be a dad. I could just watch him play. And she looked at me and just goes, "Are you out of your mind? Like, ever since Ross been born, you've been waiting for this moment to coach him. Like, shut up. Don't say that again." And so ultimately that was the deciding factor. Was, I sat down with Ross and asked him what he wanted to do, and he really wanted me to be in Colfax. And so I put my name in, and, obviously Jason Cooper would have been a phenomenal choice as well. He had been there for 20 years under Mike Morgan, and we both went for the job, and I knew they would be in good hands whichever way they went, whether it be Jason or myself. And they ended up, offering me the job. And obviously I fully immersed myself in year-round coaching, because there's so many things that have to get done in your first year. And it was a challenge for me because I had never taken on a job like that, where I had gone to a completely different school and started from scratch. I'd always just kind of been promoted up the ladder at Pullman. And so this was a new challenge for me, and it was one that intimidated me a little bit, not really knowing what I'm getting myself into. But it was something now, especially looking back after this season, that was very rewarding. I remember sitting down and I share an office with Coach Brandner in Pullman, and we bounce ideas off each other and talk about things. And I'm just sitting down there one day, and I'm going, I wouldn't have had to do anything right now if I would have stayed in Pullman. I already have my helmet reconditioning orders done. I already have jerseys up to date. I've already got my, routines down and my staff hired. And, starting with staff, having to put a staff together can be a challenge, in a small town. I was very thankful to get Jason Cooper to come back and be my defensive coordinator. I definitely couldn't have done this without him this year. He was huge for me. He was in building. He did a lot of things behind the scenes that nobody really saw, and I truly don't think I could have done it without him. And so that was huge for me to get him to agree to be on my staff. I think it was rewarding for him. It was very rewarding for me to coach alongside him. It had been something that we had kind of talked about from time to time, and I really enjoyed him being a part of our staff, because again, I couldn't have done it without it. This was the first time I had taken on a job where I wasn't in building, and the challenges that come along with that. He was able to dispel that quite a bit. I'm still trying to get comfortable with that, not being in building. You show up for practice, and you get bombarded with things that usually you take care of during the day. Well, this kid was in detention. This kid's got 2 Fs. You need to talk to him about that. This kid skipped lunch, and all these things that get thrown at you right when you come in the door. And Jason took care of a lot of that stuff. And so that was huge for me, not being in building, ordering new uniforms and doing gear inventory and all these things that had to be done. Very, very rewarding for me just to start over and kind of be myself again, in a sense. Not that I couldn't be myself in Pullman, but it was a chance to kind of restart, and do some things differently that I'd kind of wanted to do, but I had already kind of established myself for 7 years as a head coach in Pullman, and it was going to be a lot more difficult for me to change some of those things. And now I got a chance to start over. And so job number one was getting participation up. They had finished the season with 19 guys. We needed a way to get our numbers up, and we structured things in the summertime. I think that helped that. Obviously, anytime you're new, everybody wants to come out and impress a new coach and get a new role because it's a fresh start. And we were able to get 44 guys, and that was 44 guys from day one to the very last day. And that's something that I'm very passionate about. Guys quitting. And I think that, there's a way that you can try to prevent that. Obviously, you're still usually going to get a couple guys that might decide to quit, and that's okay. But, I think coaching is all about relationships. And I think if you build positive relationships, I think you can get numbers up. And that's, half the game, especially at the 2B level. It's the same at 2A as well, but just getting guys to come out, building that depth, I think, is important. At the end of the day, you can still only put 11 out there. I take you guys as a Soton as an example of that. You got 18 guys and you're ranked number 2 in the state, and you go to the semifinals, and you guys were loaded. And it wasn't necessarily just a numbers thing, but I think it's important to just show kids that you care about them. And I had watched a clinic, and again, this is another person that I'm not going to give them credit because I don't remember exactly who said it, but they're basically saying your kids will not play hard if they do not like you. They will not play hard for you if they do not like you. It's a new age of kids, and I love that he clarified you don't have to be their best friend. You don't have to go clubbing with them. You don't have to hang out with them outside of what you're already doing, but you need to get them to like you if they're going to play hard. And I think that's what we did really well as a staff. We had our guys play hard because of the relationships that we had built with them to allow them to play hard, to want to play hard for us. And I think that's very important. And, looking back on the season, yes, we won some games. That was great. But just the growth that we made as a group, overcoming adversity, dealing with adversity and challenges throughout the season, I think we did a really nice job of. And I couldn't have done it without my coaching staff. I had a great coaching staff, and it was completely new. Right. And so that was new for me. I'm now having to explain things that I hadn't had to explain in 5 years because I had my coaching staff in Pullman that just kind of knew the routine, and we'd go out and do it. And again, kind of that reset for me was huge. And now I just find myself, okay, how do I feel that way every year? How do I treat every year as a reset? And I think as at times as coaches, we say that, hey, this is a new season, we're going to reset, but we get stuck in those routines. And once those routines, you kind of get stuck in them, and it just becomes, well, this is what we do. This is our program. Another quote that, again, I can't give any credit to, but I live by it. Adapt or die. Adapt or die. You're constantly having to adapt what you do in order to be successful. And I think that's, obviously the challenge of high school is we don't get to go out and recruit, unless you're a private school, but that's a conversation. No, but we don't get to go out and recruit and have kids fit into the system we want them to fit into. And so we as coaches now have to be flexible to fit our system into our personnel. And, I think I've done a good job of that. I think I've surrounded myself with people that are willing to change and adjust and do new things. You still have your foundation of what you do as a program. You have non-negotiables, but you constantly have to adapt and change and find what works for that individual group of kids each and every year. And so the big reset of changing schools and going to a new community and all those things I thought was very rewarding. And I'm just looking forward to continue to build. And obviously Ross will be in my program starting this upcoming year, and scares me a little bit. I've seen parents coach their kids, and usually it goes one of two ways. It's you're either they're way too hard on them, or they're way too soft on them. And then honestly, the best example I saw this year was Jason Cooper coaching Zach. I mean, there was times when I didn't even remember that Zach was his kid. And, I kept talking to him like, give me some strategies. I don't know what you do that works, but man, this is one of the best interactions that I've seen. And that's kind of, my focus right now is how do I become the best coach now that, my son is in the program with me. It's a new dynamic, and I think the biggest thing is just treating him like any other kid, and obviously the pressure when we come home to want to continue to talk about a practice or talk about a play or those kind of things. I'm going to really need to hone in on. I have a big thing. I never want my guys to lose confidence, and that's how I coach, right? I never belittle a kid ever. And you look back, I'm sure you're the same way. You look back at some of our coaches, some of the things that they said to us back in the day. And, we just took it. It was just part of the game. But I never belittle. Always teach. That's one of my coaching expectations, and just building guys up confidence-wise and never letting them know that I'm disappointed in them or I'm upset in them. And then you add in the element of your son, right? And it's like, well, I expect you to know that. You've been around the game longer than. So that's one of the challenges that, I'm looking forward to tackle in this new upcoming year. But, got a lot of guys coming back, and, we've kind of already established how we do things. And so I'm just, looking forward to continuing to grow the program, in the right direction. And I had a blast. Great community support. The kids were awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Well, from the outside looking in, and obviously being a coach of a team that's inside of your league, it was definitely, you could see the growth from game 1 to game 11 or whatever it was, that the play-in game that you lost. That speaks volumes, especially from a team that had struggled the previous years. So congratulations to you and your coaching staff and your players on that. I do want to transition just a little bit into the difference in the 2A level and the 2B level. I think there's a little bit of a misconception around the area, specifically in Eastern Washington. People don't quite understand how good the 2B level is in Eastern Washington. It gets kind of left. People get a little confused. They hear 2B and they automatically think of, you got 10 guys and half of them can't dribble or half of them can't catch or whatever the case may be. It's not necessarily true here, maybe in some states or in some parts of our state, but definitely not in Eastern Washington. So the Northeast 2B League is good, and it's good in baseball, it's good in basketball, it's good in football, and those are all proven. Basketball, I think our league has either been the state champion or second place 6 or 7 years, something crazy like that, and they've also had 2 teams place in the top 5, I think, in 10 straight years. I might be off a year or 2 there, but it's something pretty crazy. And then obviously our league had 2 semifinalists in football. So coming from the GNL and the 2A GSL, where the competition was still really good, but just maybe not quite the level of some of the other Western districts are. Kind of speak on the transition of that. Obviously smaller school football is different, but maybe talk on the competition. Were you surprised by it? Did it take you off guard, or was it kind of what you expected?
Yeah, I have a saying, football's football, anywhere you go. I think the game is very similar. We had a year when I was in Pullman where we had kids come over from Palouse, and they were pretty hesitant, after playing 8-man football to dive into, oh man, now we're at the 2A level. And obviously what they found was, man, they fit right in. Wow, I can come start here. I think the misconception of, 2A and 2B being so different is just false. I think the biggest thing is just the numbers, of the amount of kids that you get out. I look at the 2 backs that you had, and your quarterback could have started easily at any team in the 2A GSL level and would have been all league at that level as well. Right?
Sure.
There wasn't this huge drop off in talent or anything like that. And I agree with you. I think, the Northeast 2B is a very strong league. I mean, you look at, across the board, we're right in the middle of basketball season, for example, and you look at the Northwest Christians and the St. George's and the Colfaxes, and, they go up and they play these bigger schools and they beat them. I think that classifications are overrated in a sense. Obviously at the football level, it's a little bit harder to move up and go challenge a 3A team, because at the end of the day, they have kids that are going to be bigger, or they have a bigger group of kids to choose from, and they're going to have more depth most of the time. But when you look at the top 11, usually it's pretty similar, and that would be the only thing that I would say that depth is different. And going from the 2A to the 2B level, obviously you have a lot more 2A guys. They're playing the whole game, at the 2B level. But as far as competition level, there wasn't a drop off at all. I mean, it looked, the same to me. And, we were fortunate to have very similar numbers to what I had in Pullman, actually. Obviously I got it up to 83 in Pullman for a couple of years, which was awesome. But, looking at, especially during like COVID times, we were right at 45, just like what I had here. And so, I didn't see a huge disparity, from the 2A level to the 2B level. And in a lot of aspects, I thought our league was a lot more competitive, here in the Northeast 2B. especially when you look at making it to state, and that's one thing that's hard at the 2A level was, you've got the Tumwaters and the Lindens and the Archbishop Murphys and, teams that is really hard for the 2As in our area to go up and compete against. Whereas at the 2B level, yes, you had Okanagan make an incredible run, the last couple of years, but it'll probably balance out, right? There'll probably be another team that emerges. You don't have that one team that, Royal City, you can already bet that they're going to win the state championship. And I really liked the league that we were in. Also from the passion standpoint, fans are passionate. I remember even playing you guys, the Soton game, the chants that the fans were doing, and it was packed, and it was a great environment, and we didn't get that a lot, at the 2A level, and that was one thing that I really enjoyed, was just that aspect of things, and obviously another difference is I have a bunch of kids on my team that have never played a game on turf, it's and, obviously, with the new Spokane Stadium and turf kind of becoming a thing in our area, that's obviously a little bit different at the 2A level, but I was impressed. I definitely didn't think it would be a huge drop off. I have been around it enough to know that, the 2B level is just as good in some situations, if not better. But I thought it was a very smooth transition, and I didn't see a huge drop off from talent or anything like that. So,
yeah, and it's just people who aren't in it kind of get a little bit of a false reality on stuff like that. And you probably have more better kids the higher you get, but the good kids are still there, and I think that kind of gets lost a little bit. And it'll be interesting. For example, the holiday tournament that's going on at LC this weekend, basketball wise, it'll be interesting. I think a small town team from Idaho has won it 3 or 4 years. Obviously, Lapwai had a player that is a D1 guy, so that's a little bit different. But small schools go out and there's the biggest classification in Idaho there, and there's one of the smallest ones, and they get to play. And one of the outside of watching Lewiston and Clarkson play in the Golden Throne, I think the most attended game I've been to high school wise was when Lapwai and Lewiston met in that Avista tournament a couple of years ago. And I mean, it had to be, I'm not sure what LC fits at 3,000 or something. There had to be 2,000 people there. It was pretty incredible for what a small town, because people don't understand that and we talked about this on the last episode, is that small town culture is different. Like people don't quite understand that. Like, you got people going to the games that have no reason really to be there, like we've talked about before. I mean, they're going to watch Johnny play because they knew Johnny, because they babysitted him in second grade or whatever. It's just different things like that you don't get at bigger schools very often. But the 2B level is just something that I wish everybody would get around in our area a little bit more. It's still really good, especially basketball is kind of an outlier. I think the 2B level in basketball would win a lot of the 2A levels around here. Like, our winner usually is pretty darn good.
For sure.
And I think everybody kind of understands that basketball wise, but football, it's not, it's just different. People still have it from back in the day where it was pretty drastically different, but now I think with people being willing to go to smaller schools, especially during COVID times where the smaller schools were open a little bit more, that's really kind of balanced it out. I think Napavine, who we played in the semifinal, 6 or 8 years of going to the semifinal in a row, I mean, that's pretty incredible. And they're surrounded by bigger schools. I mean, those guys could transfer anywhere. And I think Riverview, who got hit with that pretty hard, is they had a bunch of their kids stay in Riverview a couple years, and they were really good, and then sounds like some of them have left and went to the bigger schools around the area in the Tri-Cities. So when all of that happens, it hits the 2B schools a little bit harder than it would a 2A school if somebody leaves, but overall it's pretty much the same.
And I agree with all of that. I mean, it's looking at the support, there's people that have come up to me, in town that have no kids or relationship to the program other than just their, a Colfax resident. And, hey, great season. I loved watching you guys and how hard you guys played. And, the thing I loved the most is it looked like guys were just having fun. You on the sideline and all this they're aware. I mean, they went to the game and they watched it, and it's cool. It's cool to see, people that are passionate about it. And, I agree. You look at a lot of situations where teams from our league go up and play, bigger schools or tougher competition and hang right with them, if not, beat them. And I remember it was, Zach Cooper, who ended up being our MVP in the tier twos, and was a really good player for us. And people being shocked when I said, "Oh, he would have started for me in Pullman, no doubt. I mean, he would have been just good." And they're just like, "Really?" Like, yeah, it's not this huge difference. It's not like we're going from D3 to FBS.
Right.
I mean, it's at the end of the day, they're all still high school kids. You might have a little bit more of them at the upper classifications, but yeah, I was pleasantly surprised at this level in this league.
Yeah, and it helps that, so especially with some of the 1A drop downs this year, Newport and Freeman definitely. The top of the Northeast 2B for years was always really good, but that middle level of it now is pretty incredible. I mean, that district tournament in basketball this year is going to be really interesting, just with the middle level of the league being so good that I think a 6 seed could be 2 pretty easy in basketball, and I think it could have happened in football too. Any one of those top 5 seeds in football, I mean, you had to play good to win each week. It wasn't like you got to show up, and that was different than in years past. You'd always had 2 or 3 were like, all right, just talent alone, we're probably going to win this one. But we didn't have that this year. It was like, we have to come, we have to be prepared. We definitely have to have a game plan every single week, and it was kind of exhausting at times, but I think that made us make pretty good runs, both everybody in our league. And I think Newport got kind of a bummer. They had a tough draw, but I mean, you had to play well against them too to win. So it was just fun to see all of that. And some leagues don't get that. Sometimes it's so top heavy that you don't get to see that balance of competition, which is cool.
Well, and the other thing too, talking about classifications and the difference is that I've been around long enough to go through the West Valleys, the Cheneys, the East Valleys, going from 3A to 2A, coming in thinking we're going to go a classification down. Oh, we're going to win the league easy. Not win a league championship for a couple of years because they have this entitlement of we're going to come down into this smaller league and we're going to dominate because they're a smaller classification. And I think we've seen that across the board, and that again just goes back to that. Is there a huge difference between that 2A level and 2B level? The answer is no. I mean, it's not a huge disparity. So,
well, and I was talking to a couple coaches. Because of that big West Valley tournament that West Valley puts on in basketball, it's like, just be careful. Like, you play Northwest Christian, be careful. They're pretty good. Like, make sure you come prepared. You got to have a game plan. You can't just show up and win. I know they're smaller, but just a heads up, the same thing. St. George's was there and won a couple games against some bigger teams. Freeman I think Freeman's lost to Lake City, and Lake City's pretty darn good at the 5 or 6A level in Idaho. So it's just, people don't quite get it, but once you've coached against it a few times, it's like, okay, yeah, it doesn't matter what their classification is. They're pretty darn good.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, before we wrap this up, let's have a little rapid fire question here. So I'm going to ask you a question, try to give me as quick of an answer as possible. You ready?
Perfect. Yeah.
Best football movie of all time?
Friday Night Lights.
Favorite football player ever?
There's so many. Deion Sanders.
Favorite college team?
Washington State.
Pro sports or college sports?
I'm a very long-winded person. I need to add a caveat in this.
Okay.
It used to be college sports. I loved everything about college sports. Recently, I would say in the last 3 to 4 years, I love the NFL. That is what I love watching the NFL, the parity, too much movement in the college game. Anyways, so it used to be college sports, now it's pro sports. All right. Sorry, I had to go long-winded on that.
I'm 100% with you on that. All right, so should college athletes be paid?
Yes.
Who is the best high school football player you have ever seen?
J.C. Sherritt.
And who is the best high school athlete to come out of the Palouse, you think?
Man, I mean, I can go pretty far back. Obviously, I am hyper-focused on, Pullman history and like a, Tim Rosenball or, people like that have gone in and played professionally. I mean, there's just too many. What would you say?
I don't know. God, the Palouse is. I don't even want to guess on that one. That's a little bit out of my expertise. I think I watch a lot of them and follow them, but I don't know to it. Like Valley wise, I kind of put a caveat on this that if I'm going to say you're the best and we've had professional athletes, you have to play professionally, probably. So,
yeah.
I think a couple guys come to mind. I mean, Jesse Davis from Minnesota's pretty dang good. Played in the NFL, still plays in the NFL. Was a different type of athlete in high school. One of those guys that grew into his body. And Idaho's coaching staff did an unbelievable job of finding a position that met what he was good at. So from Minnesotan wise, that he comes to mind. Still playing in the NFL. In the Valley, I think it's people kind of forget about Josh Heitfeld.
Yeah.
Josh Heitfeld was an amazing basketball player. Had a really good career at Gonzaga, was tarnished a little bit, but was still really good. I mean, absolutely dominated Tyler Hansborough a couple times, and but what people don't understand is how good of a baseball player he was. I had some some pretty good sources say that he could have been drafted as a pitcher, so I think he would be in that conversation. Probably Valley-wise, the Palouse, I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you can go back, Lance Lincoln. Obviously, I never watched him play in high school, but just some of the stories that you hear about him, sitting down and determining what offers he was going to look at, Pac-10 at the time, offers for football and baseball, Pac-10 for baseball only, goes and plays at University of Arizona and comes back, plays at LCSC. He was a star there. Obviously, closer to my time, people that I've watched, I thought Brent Cummings was a phenomenal basketball player that came out of Pullman as I was growing up, averaged 27 points a game and was on a really good team and went and had a great career playing at the University of Montana. And obviously, if you look at professionally, JC Sherritt, was a sophomore when I was a senior, had a great career in the CFL, winning a defensive MVP up there, winning a Grey Cup. Guys that have coached like Dave Unger, just won a Grey Cup this year. That was something special and cool to see him and see him have success at that professional level. But yeah, I mean, just to pick one, man, that's hard. And I'm sure there's I hear about people from Moscow or people, in that area that I just didn't have an opportunity to see or watch. Or you look at guys like Trent Bray, who was a senior when I was a freshman and very intimidated by him and averaging 22 tackles a game when he was at Pullman and goes on to have a great career at Oregon State. And, now he's a head coach there. And, a lot of good talent, but really hard to just choose one, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely is. And it's pretty incredible if you even don't even count Spokane, but Moscow, Pullman, Lewis and Clarkson, and then some of the surrounding smaller Idaho schools. I mean, Kenny Hobart, who we had on the episode or on the podcast in episode 1, had a pretty storied career at Idaho and went in to play professionally in a couple of different leagues, and he was dang good. And then also, there's so many good baseball players that have came from the Valley and went to LC and went on to play in the minor leagues. So, I mean, any of those guys could be listed as well. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint, but it's a good question, and I love hearing people's answers on it. It gets, you could have a whole episode on that probably because there's so many names that could pop up. Well, Kof, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights. It was some really good stuff, and keep doing what you're doing at Colfax and also at Pullman with all the kids that you're teaching there, and keep up the good work. I look forward to coaching against you again this upcoming fall. But yeah, anything else to add?
No, I mean, I just, I appreciate you having me on. This was fun. I enjoyed doing this. I could have probably continued to go on for hours and hours, but obviously we, have busy lives. Maybe not this time of year, but yeah, I just, this was fun for me. I look forward to seeing this take off for you. I love that you're doing this. I think it's a great thing, and can't wait to see the other coaches that you have on. And Yeah, I know you're going to do a great job, especially knowing other members of your family that can talk. I know you got it in there. No, I'm looking forward to seeing this take off for you, and this was awesome. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And you got to help me try to get Brantner on here and see how that goes.
That'd be great. It might be a little bit shorter, but no, that would be phenomenal.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining into another episode of Beyond the Scoreboard. We'll see you next time.
That's a wrap for this episode of Beyond the Scoreboard. A big thank you to our guests today for sharing their insights, stories, and wisdom from the world of coaching. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us reach more listeners like you who are passionate about the game and the people who make it happen. Follow us on all the socials for updates and behind-the-scenes content. And as always, join us next time as we continue to go beyond the stats, beyond the sidelines, beyond the scoreboard.